Today was a historic day for South Africa, very historic. And it happened as sometimes things do when Zuma is involved in the politics of South Africa, late at night, 10 p.m. after being advertised for 6 p.m. So what's happened is that President Cyril Ramaphosa has announced that the ANC will seek a government of national unity. Government of national unity. Let's take a listen to what he had to say, and then I'll give my thoughts on the other side of his comments.
It's not a press briefing. It's the closing of the National Executive Committee meeting by the President. But we think your presence is very important. We value it. President?
Okay. National Chairperson, Comrade Gwede, Samson Mantashe, officials of the African National Congress, members of the National Executive Committee of the ANC, we have reached the conclusion of this very important special meeting of our National Executive Committee, where we reflected on the outcomes of the 2024 elections and the immediate tasks that our movement now has. Before I share with you the deliberations that we have just concluded, allow me to take this opportunity to express the condolences of the National Executive Committee to the families who have lost their loved ones during the recent extreme weather events in KwaZulu-Natal and the Eastern Cape. We remain deeply concerned about the genocide that continues to take place in Gaza, in Palestine, where atrocities against civilians continue to cause great hardship and loss of life to the people of Gaza. We condemn the most recent bombing of a school in a refugee center and facilities housing displaced people in Gaza. We call on the international community to act now to end the genocide that is being perpetrated against the Palestinian people. This NEC meeting has just concluded a full day of discussions on the election outcome and the way ahead. We have recognized that the people of South Africa have made their wishes known in free and fair elections. We accept the outcome of these elections as the will of the people of South Africa. The ANC has emerged from these elections as the largest political party in the country. We are humbled by the confidence that the people of South Africa have shown in the African National Congress. We now say as the National Executive Committee that we have heard the concerns of the people of South Africa. We have also heard their frustrations and recognized their aspirations. The 40% vote for the ANC is a recognition that the ANC remains a pivotal partner in the country's search for a way forward, and that there can be no solution in our country without the ANC. That in itself places a responsibility on the ANC to ensure that there is unity, stability, peace and progress in South Africa. During the course of the discussions of the NEC, we have looked at various different scenarios for setting up government, as the ANC, with its 40% return of votes, cannot really set up government without cooperating with others. The discussions have been constructive, robust, thoroughgoing, and have enabled us to emerge with a unified consensus position. The NEC meeting has provided clear direction on the work that we must do over the next few days, as well as the next few weeks, to establish national and provincial governments that are stable, effective, and advance the interests of the people of South Africa as a whole. The ANC acknowledges that we are at a moment of fundamental consequence in the life of our nation. Our country requires extraordinary leadership and courage to plot a way forward. We must act with speed to safeguard national unity, peace, stability, inclusive economic growth, non-racialism, and non-sexism. We will ensure the continuation of a progressive agenda of social and economic transformation in our country. We have therefore agreed that we invite political parties to form a government of national unity as the best option to move our country forward. The modalities of the government of national unity will take into account the conditions prevailing at this moment in our country's history. The purpose of the government of national unity must be first and foremost be to tackle the pressing issues that South Africans want to be addressed. These issues include job creation and the growth of our economy that will be inclusive, the high cost of living, service delivery, crime, and corruption. The NEC has agreed that this moment calls for the broadest unity of the people of South Africa. This moment also calls for multi-party cooperation and multi-stakeholder collaboration if we are to overcome the severe challenges that confront our country. From the results of these elections, it is clear that South Africans expect their leaders to work together to meet their needs. They expect us to find common ground, to overcome our differences, and to act together for the good of everyone. We are committed to ensuring that a government of national unity has the means and the ability to build an inclusive economy, to create jobs, to end corruption, to tackle crime and to improve the provision of services to our people. In establishing a government of national unity, we would be building on a very rich history of cooperation across divides of politics and ideology. We will be drawing on an experience with which South Africans are familiar and which served our country well at a time of great difficulty and division. 30 years after the achievement of democracy in 1994, we are, as the people of South Africa, once again called upon to ensure that we collaborate and that political parties should come together to forge a common future for our country. But it is not only political parties that need to come together. We believe that there is a need for a national dialogue which brings together all parties, all social partners, and all sections of society to seek consensus on the actions required to take the country forward. Such a national dialogue will enhance our pressing task of rebuilding social cohesion in a fractured society following a particularly toxic and divisive election campaign. With regard to the practicalities of the way forward, the NEC has benefited from a report on the preliminary engagements our task team has had with various political parties. The task team is composed of 5 national officials, except for the President and the Deputy President, that is convened by the Secretary General, together with other members of both the NWC and the NEC, as well as officials who support them. We have already held constructive discussions with a number of parties: the Economic Freedom Fighters, the Inkatha Freedom Party, the Democratic Alliance, the National Freedom Party, the Patriotic Alliance. We have also engaged our alliance partners to brief them on the process and will continue to seek their invaluable views and guidance. The ANC has entered these discussions with an open mind and a commitment to speak to all parties that have a stated intention to advance the interests of the people of South Africa. As the NEC, we have already agreed in April 2023 on certain principles that should guide our approach to collaborating with other parties in coalitions. The principles we will collaborate with other parties are based on advancing the building of a united, democratic, non-racial, non-sexist, and prosperous nation. We further said that any such agreement of working with others must be based on a common minimum program that focuses on measurable targets for economic growth and inclusion, on service delivery and development. All parties must commit to shared values, nation building, and social cohesion. Now, these values include respect for the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa and the rule of law, social justice and equity, human dignity, non-racialism, and non-sexism. These values also include stability, accountability, transparency, integrity, community participation, and good governance. Agreements between parties who will be involved in this whole process should, in the end, be in writing. They should be public. They should also be transparent and include measures for holding all participants accountable. Our approach to how provincial governments are formed, where we do not have an outright majority, will be guided by the same principles. The ANC notes that we do have ideological and political differences with several parties in our political landscape. However, we will not preclude the possibility of working with any party so long as it is in the public interest and it is in keeping with the principles that they have articulated. Guided by these principles, understanding the needs of the country and appreciating the expressed will of the people, the National Executive Committee has agreed to seek agreement amongst parties on the formation of the Government of National Unity. This NEC has therefore mandated our negotiating task team to proceed to engage with parties on this proposal of a GNU. They will also reach out to a broader range of parties to enrich the process and promote inclusiveness. We have directed the task team under the guidance of the national officials, the working committee, to develop in greater detail the modalities and batten down our principles and the governance framework to guide all the parties to the government of national unity to ensure that it is coherent and effective and is aimed at serving the interests of the people of South Africa. We have agreed as this NEC that it is both necessary and strategic that we act in a manner that seeks to unite the broadest range of social forces and isolate those that seek to cause chaos and instability and division. As the ANC, we will be reaching out to formations across society to build a shared program for social and economic change. In the coming days, we will be convening meetings of ANC structures to discuss the conduct and outcomes of the election, the immediate priorities, as well as the way forward. As the election results emerged last week, there was some measure of fear that the outcomes would lead to fragmentation and instability. Following election that tended towards polarization, there was a measure of fear as well that South Africans would not be able to work together. There was also fear that the transformation of our society would be disrupted and that our efforts to rebuild the economy would be derailed. Yet, as this NEC has determined, the outcome of this election presents an opportunity to forge a more inclusive, cooperative, and an effective approach to governance. It presents to the people of South Africa an opportunity to bring political parties and social partners together to address the challenges that concern most South Africans. A government of national unity is the most viable, the most effective, and most powerful way of meeting the expectations of all South Africans at this particular moment. We are called upon as this leadership and as a movement to give effect to the will and to the wishes of the voters of this country. As I conclude, allow me to extend on behalf of the National Executive Committee our sincere thanks to ANC volunteers throughout the country. Also to our deployees and our veterans and our stalwarts who worked tirelessly to reach voters across the country to bring them out to vote. We also extend our thanks, more importantly, to the people of South Africa who turned out in their millions to vote and to affirm their confidence in democracy and in the future of our country. And those important people, the people of South Africa, we thank them, irrespective of which party they voted for. We, as the African National Congress, we thank them. Our democracy has been hugely enhanced, and the people of our country have spoken, and we accept their votes and the way they have concluded their voting. Thank you very much.
A government of national unity is a coalition government formed by representatives from different political parties. That's the first thing. The main purpose of a GNU is to provide a stable and inclusive government structure that can foster stability, reconciliation, peace, reconstruction. Here are some key features of a government of national unity. Number one, you have broad representation. Number two, you have power sharing. Number three, you have a conflict resolution mechanism that is baked in. So those are critical elements of a government of national unity. The purposes are typically to create stability where you can't have stability. And then in different dispensations or moments in history, it's also to promote national reconciliation, to facilitate peace agreements. And they're typically interim in nature, but sometimes they can last for a whole administration. The big examples of governments of national unity: South Africa in 1994. That was a government of national unity. Zimbabwe between 2009 and 2013. That was another example. Kenya between 2008 and 2013. And this was following the disputed 2007 presidential elections. There was subsequent violence. And then Kenya established a government of national unity. And it actually helped them to stabilize their politics and kind of move forward, even though there were still some issues and some concerns. Right? The challenges that are created by a government of national unity include the following. You can have political rivalries, right? As different people are competing for power within different parties. A lot of politicians are aiming for that number one spot. In a government of national unity, they're a little bit closer to it. You can also have power imbalances leading to complaints, instability, and equally, they can be very volatile in and of themselves. So let's reflect specifically on today's events and what they mean. Number one, the Ramaphosa faction is weaker. This is not what they wanted. A government of national unity is not what they wanted. They wanted the deal with the DA because that would have provided President Ramaphosa the maximum protection from rivals within the ANC. And there are many other people within the ANC who are eyeing the presidential spot right now. And there's a big vulnerability in Mr. Ramaphosa's own armor, so to speak, and that vulnerability is called Phala. It's coming for him, and I did discuss in today's earlier episode what that could mean. Number two, the market option did not prevail. The markets were also trying to force through a particular option, one that was most preferable to them, but I think that democracy prevailed in a sense. They didn't get what they wanted, but they also didn't get what they didn't want. It's a stalemate, effectively. And I think that's something that has to be taken into consideration, that it's good for the market to issue its concerns. It's good for the market to have a voice because market leaders do control a lot of money in South Africa. And you do need a currency to have confidence in the business community and in the investor community. That's critical. Otherwise, they can collapse you. They have collapsed countries before. They did it in Zimbabwe. In the earlier video, I discussed that. So this is effectively a stalemate where things are right now. Paul Mashatile will be the next president of South Africa. That much is clear. People who are trying to derail his bus are not going to make it because the weakest time that someone can be in presidents is in their second term. And if this was an attempt to remove Paul Mashatile from the equation, it has not succeeded, right? Whatever you think about him, right, it's clear that the media has been very concerned about his corruption scandals, his relationships, while not being as concerned about those of others, right? Paul Mashatile is not the only politician with relationships. Paul Mashatile is not the only politician with big mansions in and around South Africa. And there are many. Some of them are above him in power. Some of them are below him in power. But it does look as if he is safe at this particular point and that he will be the next president of South Africa. He's already vice president. He's already dealing with business as the person who in the vice presidency deals with business South Africa. That's the role of the vice president in many instances. So markets need to find ways to work with him, to talk to his administration, because he is going to be next by all accounts or all assessments at this particular stage. Right, so that deals with the Paul Mashatile question. The attempt to remove him did not succeed. It was interesting that President Ramaphosa did not mention MK directly. Maybe that's because he's still, feeling one way or another about it. And then he also did say that they want to isolate those who seek to cause chaos. And that perhaps was also a reference to the MK party. I think the only thing that I would say around this is that it's correct to air concerns about people who want to undermine democracy, who want to instigate violence and all of those things. It's also correct to say that the MK party has been operating within the paradigms of the constitutional democracy. Jacob Zuma went to the electoral courts, he went to the constitutional court. Everything that he did was by the book. There's been no particular instance of violence from the NK party in 2024 that anybody can point to. Why I raise this is to say there's a danger in demonizing particular political players, particularly political players who have 15% of the vote. In between the EFF and the MK, there's 24% of the vote. The DA has 22% of the vote. So one side is not more morally justified than another. And if we're going to have democratic conversations, we have to stop demonizing those who support MK, those who support EFF, and make them as if they're irrational, crazy, or anything like that. People can have left-leaning views for legitimate reasons. People can be concerned about the way that the market is operating for legitimate reasons, and they may not even be socialists. I'm not a socialist, I'm a capitalist, but I'm very worried about the ethical behavior of some of the markets, especially the private equity markets, and I'm especially concerned when I see monopolies and oligopolies. Those are not manifestations of the market, those are market failures. That's my view. For example, it doesn't make me left or far left or whatever. EFF people would disagree with me on what I've just said, but still those concerns that I raise are legitimate. So we have to get to a point where we have maturity to be able to discuss these things without the demonization. So I think there's a caution that I would give to everybody to say, stop demonizing political parties, stop demonizing the political supporters of particular parties. Let's find each other. Democracy works on tolerance. Not tolerance just of your viewpoint as a right-wing capitalist, but tolerance of other views that are not the same as yours. So having said that, what does that mean for the EFF, for example, and the MK? I think that Julius Malema and the EFF will play a big role. I think from what I assess from what President Ramaphosa is saying, they're willing to do deals with the EFF, have conversations with the EFF. And it's important to recognize that the EFF at 9.5 or whatever the number is, close to 10%, they're still going to play a big role. Julius Malema is a talented and vocal politician, and I think they will still find themselves, maybe even with some cabinet positions. Then the question will become, and I'll do another episode about who should be in various cabinet positions. I don't think this episode will be the right place to do it. Right. Now, thinking about the government of national unity, I think that it's the messiest option. Of all the options that were possible, I think that this is the messiest option. There are too many players. It can lead to derailing or destruction of political parties. It can lead to undermining of political parties. I mentioned earlier that the government of national unity was an option pursued in Zimbabwe. It was actually pursued twice. There was once a government of national unity in the 80s, and that led to the failure of Joshua Nkomo. Then there was another one in 2008, and ultimately what that led to was the defeat of the MDC party led by Morgan Tsvangirai. So people entering into these governments of national unity need to understand that it gives time for the wounded leading party to heal its wounds and to figure out how to deal with you, in as much as it gives you opportunity to show your political talents. And in fact, Morgan Tsvangirai did say that the ZANU-PF frustrated him at every left, right, and center. And they also managed to retain control of all of the key ministries and undermine disbursements of fund. So it's going to be critical to watch who is Minister of Finance, who is Minister of Education, Minister of Health, all of those key portfolios, defense, to understand the power balances in this particular government of national unity. What does it mean for civilians? It may mean for civilians that service delivery is going to be on shaky ground because it will take a while for all of these things to be sorted out. Between now and 2026, will you see service delivery in a way that you want? I'm not sure. This was the messiest option, which is why a lot of people, I think, said that they don't want it. This buys time for everyone, though, to figure out how they're going to set up their shop, how they're going to manage their affairs, how they're going to navigate, and what they're going to say to the public. I have a final, almost like a request for the markets. Markets. Hey, when the markets, please don't derail the nation by selling the rand. Let's find a way for everybody to meet each other. To hold a country hostage as if you're the mafia is not good. You know how the mafia operates, where they'll come and say, hey, that's a nice little country you've got there. It would be a shame if anything happened to it. And then, you're like, what could happen? What are you talking about, markets? Hey man, I just like your rand. I think your rand is cute. Don't mess around with your rand. Come on, markets. Come on. Meet everybody halfway. Do not throw your toys out of the cot. Do not have what is it called? A temper tantrum with the rand, right? Markets, you operate in the DRC. You operate in Congo. You operate in many countries in Africa which are far worse than South Africa. And you make profits, you make money in war-torn parts of this continent. Markets. Behave yourself, markets. Behave yourself, markets. Meet people halfway. You have consultants, you have experts, you have lobbyists. Join this process. Do not derail South Africa to show power. Markets, I'm warning you. People are aware of what you're up to and what you do and how you move. Markets. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about this. Anyway, guys, what do you think? What do you think about everything that's been announced, everything that President Ramaphosa spoke about? Let's have a conversation. I'm in the comments. Please comment, like, subscribe. Let's have a conversation. It's a very late night episode. These niggas are keeping, not niggas, these homies, these leaders are keeping us up at night. These leaders keeping us up at night. All right? Markets, behave yourself. Till the next one.